Today's interview is with Brian Mineau. Brian went from being in the military to then being a lender, all the while doing some real estate investments on the side. He's grown quite a sizable portfolio to these days. So he talks about all these things, how he was able to make the transition, how he was able to invest in real estate out of state as well. So there's a lot of good information. Really enjoyed this interview today. Brian's a great guy, and I learned quite a few things talking to him. So stick around to the end so you can learn a few things as well. As always, like and subscribe on Wrestling with Real Estate, the YouTube channel. Go to the WWRE podcast and give me a 5-star rating and write me a good review if you think it's worthy. And I'm looking to speak to as many of you as possible. If you're interested in real estate and you love talking about real estate just like I do, there's going to be a link in the description below. Go there and sign up for a 30-minute call. I'd love to get to know more about you and see if there's any way whatsoever I can help you. There's also a sign-up page on wrestlingwithrealestate.com, the website. Go there and sign up, and I'd love to hear more about what you're up to. Anyway, but before that, enjoy today's great interview with Brian Mineau. Hello and welcome to Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to chokeslam all your real estate problems. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multifamily real estate investor, Barri Griffith. Now today we have Brian Mineau with us. Hey Brian, how you doing, man?
Good, how are you, Barry?
Good. Thanks for making the time for us today. We were talking before and you say on average you do 80 hours a week, which is incredible, but you enjoy it, right? So it's not always work. I'm sure sometimes it's work, but so I appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today. I'm excited to get into the conversation.
No, I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. So before we get started, you want to give us a little bit of a bit about your background and kind of what you're focused on right now?
Yeah. So a little bit about me. I from a small town in Northern California. I joined the Army when I was 17. I did 11 years in the Army. 2 deployments to Afghanistan, and then came back from that, and then transitioned out of the military in 2017. And since then till now, I've been doing lending as well as real estate. I started doing a lot of real estate back in like 2014 and 15, kind of hybrid, and from then till now, man, it's just been a very interesting journey.
I'm sure you've got a lot of good stories. Well, firstly, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
But the utmost respect for anyone who's been in the military. I think it would have done me the world of good when I was 18 or 17 if I'd have gone in as well. But, so I have the utmost respect for anyone who's served in the military. So thank you so much for your service. So you left in 2017. Why did you go into lending of all things, right? It doesn't seem from the military to lending doesn't seem like the most smoothest transition.
It doesn't, man. Like it was such a funny thing. So when I was in the Army, I was in the infantry. I was in the Armed Forces Airborne Division. Was air assault, airborne. Went to sniper school, like all that stuff. My job was to fight bad guys, and I got sent out here by the Army to be a recruiter, which I didn't really care for, because like when you go from fighting bad guys and then they send you to talk to high school kids, there's nothing wrong with that. It just wasn't for me. So that's a 3-year assignment that they send you out on, and then after that, I was like. I had actually gotten injured in Afghanistan twice, and then I had to have 4 ACL replacements on my left knee. So on the 4th one, they were like, hey, you can't go back to the infantry because your knee's shot, so you have to stay like a desk job. And I was like, I am not staying a desk job. I'm going to get out of the military. So I didn't re-enlist. I got out of the military, and within like 2 months, I found myself being a lender sitting behind a desk with, not just one computer, but 2, and more times than not 4 screens. Like if I could turn this right now, you'd see I've got 3 other screens open. So irony is a bitch, I guess. But so, yeah, I don't know. I just, outside of that, one of the guys that I met back in like 2014 and 15 when I first started, I bought a couple houses in Northern California through owner financing and owner carry and so hard money lending. And I wanted to keep them as rentals. And at the time I just had my W-2 income. I was a sergeant first class, which was an E7. And I made decent money for being in the military, but it wasn't 6 figures, and it wasn't enough to qualify for another home. And I went to a couple different lenders that were referred to me here locally, trying to get them to help me figure out a creative way to own these properties to keep them because I wanted them outside of my hard money flip model. And the first two lenders I talked to were like, can't do that, can't be done. And actually, I'll never forget the first conversation I had with the first guy, because his first name and my first name were the same. And I won't dog him out, but it's been one of those things that have driven me. You know, he basically was like, oh, you're young. Because at that time I was like 24, Barry. So he was like, you're young, you don't know what you're doing. Like, you can't do that. That's, you know, that's a difficult way and a scary way to make money. Just basically was just like crapping all over what I was trying to do. And I was like, okay, you know, and respectfully, like, thanks. And after it was over, I was like, oh, I'm going to find a way. And I met an individual. We were able to get it done. I met an individual. I refinanced and kept the 4 properties I wanted. And then for the next 2 or 3 years, while I was still active duty in the Army, anytime I needed help with like a tricky loan thing, I would call him. And the guy knew a lot about doing weird stuff with financing. And after like 2 or 3 years of knowing him, he was like, dude, you do some stuff I've never even been able to think of. Why don't you go try to get your license? And I was like, what, like my lending license? Is like, yeah, just try. So I was still active duty. I did a 6-day class while I was on leave. I took leave to do this class because it was from like 8 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. It's normally a 21-day class, but because of the military, I had to shrink it, you know? Yeah. So I did a 6-day class. I tested like 2 weeks later, and you only have to get an 80%. It's pass or fail. It's got like an 88% fail rate on the first try. And let's just say I passed, but it was like by the hair of my chinny chin chin. I mean, we're talking like I probably passed by 1 point, but I was like, you know what? I passed. So, and that was out. I'd never been a loan officer in my entire life. And then sure enough, there you go. Now I'm a licensed loan officer, you know?
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think that's like shows you a testament to your character, right? That you were able to get a 21-day course done in 6 days, right? That you were going to make it through, I guess, right? At that time you decided, and you also had this guy in the back of your mind probably saying that you couldn't be done, and you was kind of driving you. But I think also another important thing that to remember that is that there's going to be people all the time that tell you that stuff can't be done, right? It's like you hear it all the time. You can't buy property with no money down, or you have to go through an agent to buy a property. You have to put 20% down to buy a property, right? You'll hear that all, like that's the basic stuff. But more than that, bigger than that is when you take that lesson a little bigger, is that people tell you, oh, you can't invest in real estate, or you can't create financial freedom in the next few years, right? You can absolutely do anything. Don't let people's limiting beliefs stop you from doing right. Because if you listen to those people, had you listened to that person, you may have not be here right now, right? You may have stopped and been like, all right, screw this. I can't do that anymore. This guy told me, right? It's just brutal what people will tell you, and you can't just believe what everyone says to you. And I think another lesson of that is as well with, if we just talked about lending, for example, you'll hear lenders say all the time, oh, that can't be done, or this can't be done, right? And there's always a way to some extent, right?
Always a way.
You know, there's a way to find it. So don't settle on the first no. Maybe after the 10th or 12th or 15th no, okay, maybe then you have to kind of. But if you just take the first no that you get in lending, in offers, in whatever, you're not going to go very far, right? Don't believe what people say, I guess is my message to some extent, right? And you've got to pound the pavement and get out there and make sure that it really can't be done. So I think that's really a cool lesson. So maybe go back to that first property that you talked about that you did with the hard money lending it was in Northern California?
Actually, so that was about a year in. So the very first one that I did, the first flip that I bought that was local was at 1734 F Street. And like I said, I was still active duty at the time, so I'd get up at 5 and go work out with the guys and do our gym thing, and then go to work until 5 or 6 o'clock at night. Then get off work and go to the property and work until like midnight or 1 a.m. and then go to bed and go back home. So that first flip that I did, I bought it for, I think it was $95,000. We put $25,000 into it, and I sold it for $195,000 after like 6 months. We had to do new roof. The whole thing, it was, we call it the cat house. I know everybody has a cat house, but we call it the cat house. The very first time I walked up to that house, the agent that was with me wouldn't go inside because it smelled so bad you could smell it from the street. The lady had actually passed. She was an old woman. She was a hoarder. She passed away inside of the house. And she had like 15 or 16 cats. And oh God, one of the animal protection people had come by her house a couple times to like scoop up stray cats, and the neighbors had complained. And finally the neighbors smelled her deceased in the house from next door, and then called 911, and they came over and did a welfare check and found her deceased in the house, and the cats had eaten part of her face off because they'd been locked inside and couldn't get out and ran out of food, you know? So I buy this house. Barry, I'll send you the photos after this, man. Like, you couldn't walk into certain rooms. Like, put it this way. Where I live, or where that house was, one of our airports flies right over it. And back when they changed some of the regulations, all the houses that were underneath the original flight path coming into Washoe County had to have triple pane windows put in by the airport. Every single house on this block had triple pane windows for the whole stretch of it, except for mine. So I didn't notice that at first. And I get in there and I'm like, why does everybody else have these awesome windows? And I got these old metal, like crank windows. Like, what is going on? I called the airlines and called TSA and found out that when they did that stretch of land, it was all done by contract through the airlines. And when they got to our house, it smelled so bad and there was so much hoarding in it that they wouldn't do it. They told her, clear all this out and we'll put in thousands of dollars of triple pane windows. And she didn't do it. So like, that's how bad this house was, like there was dead animals inside. She had died inside. Like, it was rough, and of course it was my first house that I ever bid out, and I tried to like subcontractors out and it did not work. Like, I went through 3 different contractors that all took advantage of me, and eventually got to the point where, like I said, I would go there at like 5 or 6 at night. Luckily, some of my Army buddies helped out, and we would unshingle an entire roof and then reshingle it in a day, and then go to work and do our thing and come back and do it again. But I financed that deal with a hard money loan and then with an IRA from a gentleman that I met at line in a bank. So I was in line in a bank here locally, and I started talking to someone that was behind me, and we ended up grabbing a coffee, and he ended up funding that deal through his IRA. So I did that whole deal without any of my own money while I was in the Army, and had to flip half of it myself. And we still made some money on it.
Welcome to real estate investing. Huh?
Yeah, seriously. The best part about that is like, my wife was like, you're crazy. And I was like, no, we'll figure it out. Like, I've got a very odd mentality on life, because once you've been shot at and, done what you've had to do, like, nothing's ever really that scary. So it's like, whatever, like, like, we'll figure it out. She's like, you can't be so cavalier about everything.
Plus, the good thing about that deal is after that, you were like, all right, how much work can you get, right?
All downhill from here. So I thought, and then of course.
Okay, we'll get into that. But so there's a few things there. I think, for one, why did you decide to do flipping to start off with? And why did you actually go back a little further? Why did you decide to invest in real estate? What made you want to invest in real estate?
So my wife and I got married very young, and we were stationed at Fort Campbell in Kentucky. And when you've been in active duty for a certain amount of time, you can get a VA loan. So I bought my first house when I was 20 years old with a VA loan. And because I joined when I was 17. So I bought my first house when I was 20. My wife and I got married, and it was in okay condition, but it was a foreclosure. I didn't know what that meant back then. I just know that the house needed some work, and I got a good deal on it. And we ended up getting that house for like $109,000. We put, like, I've always been pretty good with my hands, and I've always, luckily been able to like watch somebody do something once and then just be like, all right, I can do that. And we ended up, replacing the kitchen and scraping all the popcorn, and like I built a shed, and like we just did, again, at that time I was an E4. So on my specialist budget, we did probably like 10 grand worth of work while I owned that home for 2 years. Well, then I got orders and had to deploy again, and we sold it, and we ended up making like 15, 16 grand, which at the time was like 8 months of my pay, So like, my wife and I are like, well, hold on a minute. Like, we just almost made an annual paycheck, and we just did some work on the weekends. We didn't have any kids at the time. So, we kind of did that. And we've always watched those shows like Flip This House and like all that stuff that was on HGTV. This is back in like 2006 and 7 and 8. And I always, like, the numbers made sense to me, and I was like, I could do that. So then when they sent us out to the West Coast, honestly, Barry, I was driving home from work one day at like 6 o'clock at night, and I'd been at work I'd been up since like 4:30. And I heard a commercial on the radio for one of those like flipping seminars that you come and you spend like 2 weeks or like 2 days and it's free. But then somehow by the end of it, you spent like $1,499, and like, you're like, wait, what just happened? So I went to one of those, and I listened to what the guy said, and I was the youngest person in the room. I was actually still in my fatigue. So I was in my Army uniform. And I listened to what the main speaker said. His name was Adam. I'll never forget. And I'll be honest, I signed up. I was like, you know what? I believe in what they're saying. So I've always been a guy that just takes action. So I signed up. At that time, we only had one child. We had saved up for my second deployment of the sale of our house. So I had $20,000+ in our savings account, which again, for being an E7 in the military, that's a lot of money. And we had no debt at all, not a single credit card. I spent all $20,000, and I maxed out 2 $10,000 credit cards. And then I came home and told my wife, hey, I just spent $40,000.
Oh, shit.
And she was like, she actually was like, I'm sorry, what did you do? And then I was like, oh no, I spent $40,000 and I'm flying to San Antonio and to California like in 2 weeks. And she's like, you did, what did you do again? Like, what did you do? And I told her, I was like, you know what, babe, we've talked about this for a long time. And I took the Cortez approach. I burned the ships and I committed. So now we have no money and we're in debt. So if I don't make this work, then we fail. So it's all on me. And she was, of course, always been super supportive and was like, all right, well, I believe in you, you know, like, you know, what do you say to somebody that just spent $40,000 when you only make $38,000 a year? You know, like, so she didn't murder me in my sleep. That was the scariest night of my life.
Slept with one eye open all night long.
I did. I was waiting to find a pillow just slowly put over my face. It didn't come. The pillow didn't come. But fast forward, you know, within 3 months of that event, I bought a house. I actually bought 2 houses within 3 months of that event. Within 12 months of that event, I bought 20 houses. And from then until now, I've bought over 100 homes in 7 different states and over 100 doors in commercial properties. And I've done a little over $11 million in real estate in the last, that I've personally owned in the last 5 years while being active duty military.
Wow, that's incredible.
So, incredible. I mean, it was worth it, but it definitely was, it was interesting, you know, so.
What was the 40,000 for the training? Or was
yep.
So you paid 40,000 for the training with no purchase, yeah. But obviously that's a lot of money, right? For anyone, regardless of if you're a millionaire or if you're broke, or 40,000 is a ton of money. But obviously it worked for you, right? That 40,000 turned into a lot more than 40,000.
No, 100%. And like it wasn't all at once. It was like you could sign up for different. There was 5 different classes, and I just said I want them all because again, I've got a problem where when I see something that makes sense, I just do it. So I signed up for all 5 classes at once. And of course, even then they were like, well, why don't you just do like this one and then do this one? I was like, no, because again, if I commit to them all, I'm just going to do them all. So I went to all of them, which means I had to travel to San Antonio. I had to travel to California. I had to go to Miami. I went to every one of the classes. And again, my brain's really weird. Like when I hear somebody say something most of the time, I can remember it as well. So it's just like, I came back and was like, this did exactly what they said to do, trying to change it a little bit based off my market. And I mean, yeah, to your point, Barry, like we've done a lot of houses. And what was weird is probably like 14 months after that, 1 month, it was March actually. So it was even less than that because it started in June. So less than a year. So like 8 months after that, in the month of March, I grossed $150,000 that month.
Wow.
So I remember because I sold 2 really good projects, and I remember being like, I actually have the checks in one of my offices at home, like framed up on the wall. Because it's like, here's a $74,000 check and here's a $75,000 check, which was the equivalency of 5 years of my income in the military, like net. So I was like, all right, maybe there's something, you know, maybe there's something to this.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible, you know, and I'm glad that, you know, there's stories all the time, right, of people that spend a fortune on courses and they get nothing, absolutely nothing on it.
Right.
I think there's 2 things, right? One, I don't think either of us would maybe advise anyone to spend 40,000 on a course,
No.
right? And, you know, especially these days, I think there's tons of information. There's plenty of people out there that you can go with. But for you, and I'm not knocking you one bit because it absolutely worked 1,000 times. You know, that 40,000 was a bargain for you because it made everything work for you from then. You've made that money back so much more times, right? But I think also what it is, right? So the courses aren't always that good and they charge a lot, right? But also I think what is it depends on the person, right? I'm sure there was plenty of other people that paid 40,000 maybe for that training, but they did nothing, right? And it's on that person, right? So it's, yes, you can blame the training sometimes, but also it's the person, it's you, and you've got to take that, you know, that ownership of what's going on yourself, right? That extreme ownership, as Jocko talks about, right? I think it's
Right.
so true, right? And you know, there may have been, I don't know, 20 people in the classes, and I bet you were probably the one that made the most money out of anyone and had the most success, right? Because of
I mean, it's the one I went to is a very, very well-known one. I mean, was the first one they ever started, and they're still in the business to this day, and they make a lot of money, and they have like 500 to 1,000 students a year. And I would say that I've been lucky enough to be, I would say, in the top 1 to maybe 5% of their students. But to your point, Barry, like I couldn't agree more. Like the problem, it's not even a problem. The reality is some people don't have the drive or the determination or the self-control. You know, like I remember being at some of those events, and again, to your point, like I spent a lot of money to go to these things, but of course in my mind, I'm like, so did they, you know, and it's 6 o'clock at night and we're still sitting in a classroom going over ARVs and loan to values and DCR and rent roll, like all these things that you need to know how to do. And I'm watching like the guy next to me like do this.
Yeah.
And I'm watching the girl on the other side of me, like texting on her phone. And of course, like I'm just sitting there, like, again, the military was really good for someone like me because we used to have to stand out on parade fields for like 6 straight hours without moving. So it's like in the hot sun in uniform. So I'm sitting in class like, man, this is a breeze. Like it's not hot. There's no bugs. Like no one's yelling at me. Like, so, you know, and then at night I'd go back to my hotel room at like midnight and then I'd study and get ready for the next day. And it's just, there's a lot of people that go to events like that in my opinion, don't take it seriously and then complain afterwards. And again, I don't sell anything. I've got people every day that ask me for help and I help them. So I don't want to knock the seminar business, but to your point, a lot of them are not what they say they are, but there are some out there that if you do roughly what they say, you should be able to make a decent amount of money.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm getting from you, you know, that's apparently clear is that you're extremely driven, you know, and I wonder what drives you, what makes you get up in the morning, you know, what makes you, I'm sure at this point, right, with all the deals that you've done, you could probably, you know, ride off into the sunset, right, into the beach somewhere, or, you know, do whatever you want, but you're still working 80 hours a week. What drives you at this point?
It's always two things, you know, like obviously one is my family. I want my kids to have a better life than I had, just like every parents do, you know, like I want my kids, if they want to be able to do something and it's within reason and I think it'll benefit them in the long run, be able to do it. And then I want my wife to have the life that I think she deserves, you know? So like whenever I start feeling sorry for myself or down on myself and something doesn't go according to plan, I'm like, well, one, you excuse my language, but you made the shit sandwich. And two, you've got to eat it. So you might as well just get over it and do it, you know? So my family drives me and then my pride. Just like you said earlier, Barry, when I was young, I was a middle child of 5. I was not a big kid. Like I wrestled 112s in high school and I was only like 5'3". When I first met my wife, she was 6 feet tall and I was 5'3". So I was just always a small guy, you know, always thought I was smarter than everybody. So I like talked a bunch of crap. And when you're 5'3" and 112 pounds, like not a lot to back it up with, you know? And I've just always been determined and my pride's always been like, hey, you can do this, you can figure it out. And then not to get too, I don't want to say emotional or political or anything, but I lost a lot of my buddies in Afghanistan, like double digits. And that's another thing that always drives me is I think about like, they gave their life so that I could have a better life and I need to earn that. So, you know, be a man, do the right thing, do the right thing, do the right thing, you know, and we might get to it, but there's a situation right now that has cost me a substantial amount of money, but I'm doing the right thing, you know, and that's why I try to earn what was given to me.
Wow, that's extremely powerful. Thank you for sharing that, man. Because obviously, you know, these things aren't always easy to talk about, but you know, that's incredible, man. So you know, I'm sure that you know that makes you think that you can't fail, right? You can't stop, right? You can fail, right. You can't stop, right? And it's just like, yeah, that's incredible. Well, since you mentioned it, do you want to talk about what you mentioned? Is this the kind of situation, or is that something we can't talk about for any legal reasons or whatever? Only if you want to. If we don't, we can move on. We can absolutely move on. There's plenty of other.
I mean, I don't mind. It's still actively going on, but
okay,
I'm winning.
We'll talk about it another time. We'll make a different episode for that. So I wasn't trying to dive in for.
No, you're good, Barry. I don't mind sharing it. I'll give the cliff notes. I bought in 2017, me and some partners bought a hotel in Lake Tahoe. I don't know if you know where Lake Tahoe is, but it's it's very beautiful. It's very expensive, and we found this really good deal. A contractor found this really good deal. He brought it to me and another investor. And then we took it to 2 other investors because the price was 7 figures just to pick it up, and then the rehab was also over $500,000. So we put together a team. We bought this thing. And I, at the time, had already done like 25, 30 plus flips. And I had credit lines that would give us most of the money, and very long story short, if you and I do a deal together, Barry, like I always feel like everybody should bring something to the team. And at one point I was signed for an $858,000 loan, me and my wife. And then I had about $85,000 in this deal, and every partner had something, but one partner only had $1,500. So if we're working on a $1.6 million project and you have $1,500 in, and I have 85,000 plus I'm signed for another $1 million, like that's not proportionate, So then when the company needed more money and I said, hey, Barry, it's your turn to put money in. And you said no. I was like, all right, I'll give you a month, but you got to put something in. And then a month goes by and that person decided to put nothing in again. So then I put a motion to the board to vote that person out of the company. Everybody agreed with me. And then because I'm a good guy, I was like, hey, you did work on some stuff. What is that to you in value? And he gave me a number and I paid him out and he walked away. And we were doing one other transaction at the time. And I'm going along my life. And then I get served on a lawsuit and done over, God, I don't even know, Barry. I really don't. Somewhere around like 120 to 150 transactions and never been sued, never had a problem. And then I vote this guy out of a company and he starts suing me. So 2 years and $156,000 later, we go to court. The judge agrees I did nothing wrong and I win and dismisses it. And then he appeals it. And now we're going back through the appeal process because he's appealed it. And what sucks is at one point I offered to give him all of his money back. You know, I was like, hey, let's just be done. I'll give you all your money. You don't get any profit. You don't get any interest because like I'm buying you out of the deal. You know what I mean? Like I'm giving you what you put in. So if you put, let's say 100 grand in the stock market, Barry, and something doesn't go according to plan, do you get that money back?
No.
You know, you don't get that money back.
Yeah.
So because I'm a good guy, I was like, hey, this is how much you've got in. And it wasn't 100 grand. I was like, this is how much you've got in. I'll give it all back to you. Just go away. No, I want all of my money plus interest plus profit. And I was like, that's not how this works. Like you're in the middle of a deal. The deal's going on. You want to be bought out like you were bought out of the other deal, but I'm not just going to cut you this substantial check. You know, you're going to wait till the deal's over. Well, I don't want to wait. Started suing me. And then as the lawsuit went on for now, it'll be 3 years in March. I offered him 2 more times a substantial amount of money and he wants all of his money plus interest plus profit now plus his attorney fees. And I'm like, well, you're suing me. Like I offered you your money back and you know, so I was like, I'm not going to do it. Like I didn't do anything wrong. Let's go to court and see what happens. And I don't appreciate how long it took to get to court. And I don't appreciate how much I had to spend to get to court. And that's one thing too, Barry, that like, you know, if you're a new investor, I had never even thought about someone suing me. And what really sucks is like, if I didn't have $157,000 to pay my attorney, I would have just lost. Mm-hmm. But because I could afford it, I went to court and I won, you know? So again, it's one of those, like, what does the average person do? They can't afford to defend themselves. They just lose. Like, how is that fair? You know, but that's enough of my soapbox. I already won the main lawsuit. Now he's appealing it. I'm going to win that too, because I didn't do anything wrong. And then because I'm a good guy, we'll see what I decide to give him.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry you had to go through that. Thanks for sharing. But looking back, what would you have done differently? Would you have worked to the operating agreement, had better contracts? What would you have?
100%. So this is, again, that's why I hope I don't sound like I'm complaining.
No.
Everything that happened is 100% my fault, because up to that deal, I used the same contracts for my operating agreement, my JVs, my contracting agreements, my promissory notes. I did it all myself. Everything was the same. Because of the third party that introduced me to this person, we used their contract because it was like a neutral contract. And it left so much up for interpretation that when finally now, of course, the one time I use someone else's contract, I get stuck in litigation. It doesn't, you know what I mean? It didn't protect me. To be honest, it didn't protect him. It was so vague that's the problem. It's so vague. It's like, who's responsible? You know, and like, what is this investment? Like, it's just contracts. Like, and then obviously, like Todd and I were talking the other day, oversight of your project. A couple of things I should have gone to the project a little bit more because it was so far away. When I started getting odd text messages, and at the time I had a project manager who was going to the project, and she was giving me reports. But you know, I think Todd always said something about like, you know, inspect what you expect, and I didn't inspect what I expected enough, in my opinion. That's just me saying it, but I did what our contract said I had to do, but I probably should have done more.
Yeah. You know, I think that's, you know, a lesson for anyone, right? Especially like with partnerships and joint ventures and anything like that, right? Because there's a lot of money involved usually in a lot of these deals. And, you know, you might have a friendship with someone, but, you know, even if you have a friendship with someone, it's going to get tested when it comes to money. And this wasn't a friendship, of course, but I'm just making that extreme example just to prove that, you know, I've had plenty of friendships going south just because of money, right? And people get greedy, people get that dollar signs in their eyes, and people a lot of times, unfortunately, are out for all they can get a lot of times. So I think it's important. I think, unfortunately, I'm so sorry you had to go through that, man. That sucks. I truly do.
No, it's...
Because I know you're a good guy, and it always sucks when the good guys get. Well, there's a word, but I won't use it. But the guys get, you know, right? So I'm so excited.
I appreciate that.
But hopefully people can at least learn from it, and I'm sure you
Right.
as well, right? Learn and just get
Contracts.
it doesn't matter, right? If it's your best friend, if it's your mom, if it's your dad, put it in a contract. It's not
Put
gonna
it in a contract.
put it in a contract so everything is clear. What is everyone doing? What does everyone expect? And get everyone to sign it. And then there's nothing down the road, no hiccups, no nothing, and it's going to cost you a fraction of the cost of what it could cost you in the end, right? And so I think
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
well, so you know, are you mainly flipping? Is that your main real estate investment or investing strategy? What I know you do.
That's part of how it started. So I think you asked me earlier, like, why did we go with flipping? Well, at the time, like, you know, I didn't make enough money to buy cash flows that weren't like owner carry or owner finance. So I was like doing a model of flip 3 or 4 homes, then buy a cash flow with it. So that's why at one point we had 7 doors in Northern California, and all of those were purchased off of the flips that I did in other states, you know. So we would do, you know, 2 or 3 flips, buy a cash flow, 2 or 3 flips, buy a cash flow. Because obviously, in my opinion, cash flows are where, you know, the long-term retirement plan is. So, you know, last year, I think I bought 34 homes in where we're investing out there in the Midwest. And I've been using some of the profits from those to buy some buildings like with Todd and other partners. And the market's really good. There's a lot of opportunity. I mean, we picked up a house, now it's been about a month ago, for 30 grand. I put an offer today, actually I put 2 offers out today. One was like 54 and the other one's like 112. But, you know, that was just to get the ball rolling. And on those properties, one will sell for probably 140, 150, and the other one will sell for 200 plus. So, you know, where I'm at right now in the country, you can't do that. Like you can't find flips where I am right now that makes sense, because there's just not enough inventory and there's too many people competing, you know. So we had to branch out to other places, and then obviously we've been trying to capture that through flips to then buy big commercial buildings and multifamilies.
So you all your flips are out of state for the most part.
Actually, yeah, as of the 17th of this month, I sold the last project I had in Nevada.
Wow.
So I don't have a single thing going on in Nevada, but in another state, I've got 50 plus things going on.
Well, that's incredible. Maybe talk a little bit to that, to how you were able to do that, right? Because, you know, there's always talk about, should you invest in state, out of state? I know Todd is a big component of investing where he is, and that makes sense, right, to him, but it doesn't always make sense to us because prices can be, you know, sky high, especially in California, right? And it can not always make sense. But to flip, I think it's one thing to buy a buy and hold in another state, right? Because there's not a lot that's going to be changing, right? But to buy a flip and to do multiples at the same time, you've got to be on your stuff pretty good, right? So how have you been able to do so many flips out of state?
So the biggest thing that you've got to do is and everybody says the same thing, you've got to build a solid team. You've got to go out there and spend the hours. You've got to interview agents. You've got to interview agents, and then you've got to interview agents. And then once you've got a good agent, then they'll help you interview good contractors. Because if you have a good agent, good agents have good contractors. So then you know, once you find an agent that you trust to spend your money like it's not their money, you know, then you say, hey, who do you recommend that's a contractor? Because of course, when an agent gets a deal and they get the repair list, just like a normal buyer and a normal seller just buying their first time home or maybe, you know, their second home, there's going to be repairs on that list and somebody has to do those repairs. Well, 90% of the time, the good agents have full-blown contractors that come out and handle that for them. So then I always ask them, hey, who's, you know, a contractor you recommend? I'll go meet that person. And then once you have 2 or 3 contractors that you can trust and you've got a team established, then after that, you just got to have your agent or your wholesaler or whoever's bringing you property, send them to you. You crunch the numbers. Like today, I had a property sent to me this morning at like 6. I crunched the numbers and got my contractor out there to go out there like an hour and a half later. She came back and said, hey, this is going to be the rehab amount. I said, okay, awesome. Let's put an offer in. If we get that property, then honestly, I'll do a couple of documents, like 5 or 6 documents. And then I use a couple different like software platforms and tracking systems to like monitor the project. And then it'll just be flipped. You know, I'll go out there sometime next month and it'll be either done or almost done. And then I'll put it on the market and everybody will make some money and we'll do it again.
Wow. So how much time will you spend on the property and around the property? You'll just go there for a day or two when it's nearly finished?
No, so I mean, like what I normally do is I'll fly out there for 1 week every single month and I'll go to every single project. So I just like, I'll spend, like last time we went out there, we landed at midnight on a Wednesday And then the rental car place was closed. So I had a rental car lined up, but I couldn't get it. So then I had to take a taxi to the hotel and then take a taxi back to the rental car place in the morning. Got in my rental car at like 8 a.m. and drove to like 25 different projects. So I get there, just get out, look at it, walk inside, talk to that contractor, figure out what's going on, what's the next step, what's the holdup, what's up with this, what's up with that, and then go to the next one, you know. And then of course, in between drives, it's like one contractor has 6 projects, another one has 4 projects, another one only has 2 projects. So then you got to coordinate the contractors. I've started working with another agent. So then you've got certain agents and certain properties, and it's just, I guess sometimes I don't realize how much it is to track. When I say it out loud, I'm like, man, that's crazy. Like,
yeah. Well, what I'm hearing is that, as you're saying that, is that, you know, people have got no excuse, right? You're doing all this work, right? If you want to do it, you're going to do it. And if you don't,
right.
you're not, right? It's just as simple as that, right? You know what I
Winners
mean?
find a way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just it's incredible to hear you talk about all this stuff that you're doing. I think it's incredible to you when you're saying it out loud. You probably don't realize when you're doing it, but you know, if you want to do it, you can do it, right? It's just as simple as that to me. If you can go out there and do it, and there's really no excuse apart from, you know, maybe laziness or whatever, lack of motivations or whatever. I think that's cool to hear you do that. And then you said something else about finding a good agent. But how do you find, right? It's one thing. Like I want a shit agent, right? It's not part of the thing. But how do you find a good agent? I think, you know, that could help a lot of people if you have some tips or ideas about how to find a good agent.
So there's 2 different philosophies that I've had on this. One was I went on to like Zillow and I looked up agents in the area, and I found agents that had like 10 to 20 reviews, and they were all within a certain time, like a recent time frame. Because my thought process at that point was find newer agents, because they're going to be hungrier and they're going to be willing to like drive to properties we don't have to contract. And like, again, from investing remote, I don't go to a property unless I have it in contract. So the only time I'll do that is if there's not enough photos for me to tell what's going on. So like, out of the 2 properties we just put offers on, I had to have one agent go to one because there wasn't enough photos for me to really make a decision based on the rehab. So my thought process was, if I find agents that are starting out and don't have 400 reviews and don't have like 6 people on their team, they're going to be more inclined to like do things my way and or spend time, to help us both, you know, grow our business together. And in some capacity that's been very effective, and then in some other capacities it hasn't. So then I went to a different approach and was like, all right, I'm going to find literally the top agent in that area, and I'm going to contact them. And I'm going to be like, hey, I want to buy investment properties. Well, of course, everybody will tell you that when you do that, they're like, yeah, all right, buddy, we get that from everybody. Click, you know. So what I did, and I'm not saying everybody should do this, but I bought 3 houses in a city that I had never been to. And then I called around to find agents and found an agent and was like, hey, I've invested. I bought these 3 properties last week. I'm looking for somebody to list them for me when they're done, but I also need help finding more properties. And that worked pretty well, because they were like, you know, all right, what are the addresses? And they started looking, they're like, holy crap, this guy bought 3 houses and never even been here. And obviously he's not going to waste my time. Now, the problem with agents like that I found is they're more inclined to spend your money like it's their money. And if they don't see that payday, then their attitude changes pretty quickly. Whereas if you find someone that's hungry, like when I first started out, and even now I'm still hungry, don't get me wrong, you know, it's hard, Barry. Like, I've got a couple agents that I really, really like, and I trust them. And then I've got some other agents that are very good at their job, and I'm like, you're one transaction away from finding yourself not working with me, you know? So that's why I said, find a good agent 3 times, because it's almost as hard as finding a good contractor, you know?
Yeah. I think that's a great advice, because it's always, you need a starting point, right, to find deals. It's kind of hard to like Google contractors and Google property managers or whatever, right? Everyone sounds good on freaking Google, and nobody has less than 5 stars, right? They always have 5 stars, a review, and you can read the review, and you know that's either them or a family member or something. You can kind of read through it. But you need that one person that is that point that's going to take you to that person. Because if you're going to be working with that person as well, they're not going to give you a crappy contractor, hopefully, that's going to make them look bad and make you not work with them, right? Because it's their reputation on the line as well. So if you have that starting point, I think that's a great point to build the rest of the team. And, you know, rock stars know rock stars, right? Good people know good people, right? If you find a good agent, there's a good chance they're going to work with good contractors who's then, you know, they work with good vendors.
And then they're going to put you in contact with a good title company that when you call from a 3-hour different time zone on a Friday and say, hey, I need this, you know, somehow it gets done, you know? So that's where I agree, Barry. Like, you got to find the right people, which, you know, one other thing I'd like to say on that is, you know, it ties in with contractors. I'm not saying like be willing to lose money like it's easy. I'm saying you have to be willing to spend money and the thought of losing money, you know, like the only way you're going to know if an agent or a contractor is really good is if you do a deal with them, you know? So you hire this good agent, you hire this good contractor, and either A, it's going to go well, or B, it's going to go not so well, you know, and maybe C, there's a middle ground somewhere in there. But that's another thing that a lot of investors trying to invest out of state are afraid of, is like, well, I'm not there, I don't know this guy. It's like, well, the only way you're going to find out is to do it. And it's either going to be okay, and you can put as many checks and balances as you want, which is what I've tried to do. But like I said, winners find a way. I almost sound bad, but scumbags find a way. Like, if they want to take your money, they're going to find a way to take your money, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing sometimes, like, they almost seem more motivated than us sometimes, right? That's the stuff. I almost think it would be easier if these people just did the job right, because the lengths that they go to, and we're talking about contractors, everything, the lengths that they go to fool you and to do it is almost harder than doing the job.
It's incredible. I tell my wife all the time. She tells me, like, she gets so angry. And like, we have stuff stolen, we have stuff broken into. Like, just last week we had a situation, and she gets so angry, and I'm just like, I'm not even mad, I'm impressed. Like, with the thought and the time that was spent to do this, like, congratulations, you cost me like $1,200. I'm never going to use you again, but I'm just impressed. Like you could have done it right and made a bunch of money and worked for me for a long time, but instead, you know, kudos to you. Kudos to you.
Yeah, and not to harp on the negative of this too long, but it always blows me away that they'll step over dollars to make pennies, right? They'll walk away with $800 that you've given them to start the job or whatever, but the job was 20 grand or something. And like,
Yep.
Come on, how does that make any sense? But hey, there we go. That's the way. Yeah. So obviously you're in lending, right? You single family lending, is that mainly what your focus is on?
Yep.
Okay. So maybe, now's a good time. We're at, the date is today, September 30th, right? Talk a little bit about what's happened during the pandemic and how things are now with a lending perspective.
Yeah, so pre-pandemic, everything was going pretty well. The rates had just dropped. Obviously, through the pandemic, the Fed have lowered the rates to lower than they've ever been in the history of our nation, which has been very good for refinances. But there's all these second and third order effects that people don't realize. And I don't want to get too on a soapbox for that, because I'm also super passionate about that. But like, what happens is when all these lenders like myself and other lenders 2 or 3 years ago did all these loans, you assume that the average loan is going to get serviced for 3 to 7 years. Well, what's happened in the last 9 months is 60 to 70% of those loans that we thought were going to be serviced by the same company for 3, 4, 5, 6 years that were just written 2 or 3 years ago have all been refinanced. So the interest that was going to be made, all the stuff that was profited off of that loan is basically washed away because it hasn't hit that break-even point yet. Like, a loan's not profitable till it gets to a certain point. So it's just like when people pay on their house. Like, you're not really paying on the principal until you get to like year 9 or 10. Like, you are, but you're not really impacting it. It was the same philosophy with the loans that were written. So because of that, they kept the rates low to try to spur more loans. But at the same time that they're spurring more loans, those loans are refinancing loans that shouldn't be refinanced yet. So it's just like this washing machine of money being refinanced that probably shouldn't be refinanced. Rates are, I just locked somebody today at like 2.25, which is insanity. They're going to stay low for a while. Luckily, our purchase business and purchase market has stayed pretty strong. That's helped a lot. I think that if the rates don't go back up by the end of like Q4, I think we're going to have a problem. You can't loan money for 30 years at 2.25% and 2.5% and expect to have a long game. You know what I mean? Like, the year I was born, Barry, the average interest rate on a house was 11%. And people paid it. So it's like, it's just, I don't know. I've got mixed feelings about that, because obviously I buy a lot of properties and I like low interest rates too, but it's such a double-edged sword. The market's really strong where we are.
In what way is it a double-edged sword?
So like I was saying, if you keep lending money like that and people keep refinancing, eventually what happens is the warehouse lines that lend the money, and this is it's already happened. It actually happened at my company, is the warehouse line. Let's say that you and I are a warehouse line, Barry. And what that means is we're sitting on.
What is a warehouse line?
Yeah, so that's what I say. So let's say you and I are sitting on $500 million, and we manage this portfolio. Asset-based securities, mortgage-backed securities. We manage you know, we work for ABC Insurance Company, and all of their insurance premiums pay up to give you and I $500 million to invest with. We then use that money to back mortgage-backed securities, and we lend it out. You and I do that on the intent that our 3 and 4% we're going to make on interest over 30 years, we're going to make, you know. Well, when we loan that money out, and then 6 months later, you know, XYZ company refinances it and basically washes it away. Well, off of our profit model, you and I don't make any money until we've owned the loan for at least 3 years. So effectively, we lent out a bunch of money, and we spent fees to get those loans done, and we have employees, and we actually lost money. So if a loan's refinanced and moved from one warehouse line to another within 3 years, on average, it's a losing transaction. There's been more refinances in the last 6 months than the history, like in one bubble, than any other time in the history of the United States. Like, more loans have been refinanced than any other time. So the problem with that is there's warehouse lines now that are just going, all right, I'm not lending anymore to refinances. We're only doing purchase business. So now you know, here's the double-edged sword part. Let's say that I was in forbearance with my mortgage and I now want to refinance my property. If that company shut it off, what do? So the jumbo lending, for example, completely stopped at, I don't even know a company that was doing jumbo loans for like 90 days. So anyone trying to buy anything over roughly $510,400 couldn't get a loan, because jumbo lenders, that was their fears, that we lend this money out, this massive, you know, these hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars loans, and then somebody refinances it in 6 months, their loss is 20, 30 grand per loan. I mean, that's just one loan, you know. Like, I have a jumbo right now that if something doesn't happen, the loss for my company is like $40K. $40,000 lost on one loan, because the interest over that $1 million loan over the course of 30 years is like $600,000, you know. So the double-edged sword part is, I like low rates. Everybody likes low rates. I'm making more money the more refis I do, but I'm also chopping my legs out from underneath me, because there's warehouse lines now that are saying, like, we just got hit with any refis that we do now to the end of the year have an extra quarter point on them. So the warehouse line, like, the rate should be, let's just say 3%. The warehouse line's like, no, sorry, it's 3.25%, or we're not going to do the loan. So it's not really a market-driven economy is what's happening with our lending. It's a consumer-driven, which is scary, because again, I had someone that refinanced 3 months ago with another company that had called me to refinance because they heard from a friend how good their rate was. And I'll be honest, Barry, the numbers make sense and they should do the refi. Yeah. But everybody in that past transaction now is going to get screwed. The lender has to pay back their own commission, because if someone refinances within 6 months of another loan, it's called a buyback. So like that $30,000 fee per loan gets, like, the LO gets hit, the processors get hit, everybody gets hit. So it's a dangerous game.
Yeah. What could the consequences be of that? Mortgage companies go out of business?
Yeah, they're going to run out of, that's exactly what will happen, is they'll run out of money to service their own loans, and then giant servicing companies like Mr. Cooper will have to purchase them. I mean, they're so big that I don't think would ever go out of business, but companies that don't have enough money in the bank would basically run out of money and go out of business. And then what happens to your loan, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think that's the crazy part, is that everyone's kind of thinks that the future looks like this, but it's so unpredictable, right? What's going to happen next? Like, that's just one consequences of what happened, right? You know, there's so many other things that they've done, the PPE loans, the printing money, the everything like that. What are the consequences? Is that things don't just happen and there's no consequences to it, right? You know, I think it's so complicated, the economy and everything that goes into it. It's impossible to have any kind of prediction, but I think, you know, it's kind of a little bit scary, right? Because there's so much going on, right? It's not, clearly it's not clear what's going to happen next, right? I don't think so. Maybe, you know, maybe you have a crystal ball, or you're 10 times smarter than maybe, yeah. But it's kind of, it's a little bit, the unknown is obviously scary. Something you talked about before, and I wanted to dive in before we kind of get off the call, and I think it's such an interesting concept, is the 401k into the BRRRR strategy, right? That you're super passionate about, and then you think is a phenomenal strategy, right? Did I say that correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So self-directed IRAs, I think it was like 1974 was the URSA Act. If you look that up, or if someone looks that up, they can find out all they need to know about it. Well, they can find out the regs about it, but it's also very complicated. But you can take a self-directed IRA and you can buy real estate with it. So if you have an IRA from if you have a 401k from a previous company, or an IRA that you're just sitting on, or you have a SUP, which is a self-employment plan, any of those different plans, you can roll them over. You can take them from your current custodian and you can roll them over to a third-party administrator, a TPA. They then will basically sit on your funds, but then you can use those funds to buy real estate. And the traditional model with like stocks, bonds, and mutual funds is they get paid a percentage on the portfolio and they manage it and they invest it, and that's how they make their money. But with a self-directed IRA, the funds get put under their advisory, but they don't invest the funds for you. So if you have $100,000 sitting at a self-directed IRA company, it's just sitting there. You're not going to make any money, but you're not going to lose any money. Then you find a transaction you want to do, like, you know, one of mine and Todd's models is a quad model. You find this 4-unit for 100 grand. You can get a loan on it for, let's say, 75%. So that's a $75,000 loan. Then if you have an IRA, you could take $25,000 from your IRA. It's not going to be taxed. Put that as the down payment, send it straight to the IRA company, will send it straight to the title company. And you effectively just bought that property with just your loan and the IRA. Then when you refinance it, whenever you're done, let's say it's 6 months later, you refinance it, the title company sends the money back to the IRA, including the profit, and everything that was done is completely tax-free.
Wow.
You don't get taxed on any of it. It's a huge model. Like, one thing I always tell people when, like, again, I had a young man today asking me, like, how do I get started? I don't have any money. I was like, make a list of 10 people that you think have a retirement account. Go to that person once you, like, you know, and obviously we'll talk between now and then, but go to that person and ask them what they make every year. 80% of people don't know. And the ones that do are going to say somewhere between 5 and 7%. If they say more than that, they're not factoring in inflation or the cost of their actual IRA. So that if they're only making 5 to 7% and you offer them 10% or 12%, I mean, why would they not take that? It's actually more secure if you think about it, because stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, what is that? You know what I mean? Like, can you touch that? Is that a tangible asset? Whereas if you buy it with an IRA, you're secured against that property. So if anybody sells that property, refinances that property, God forbid, burns that property down, you have insurance. The IRA requires that you have insurance, and they require that they're listed as the insured person. So if the property burned down, the IRA gets paid before anybody gets paid. Like, it's such a safe vessel to invest in or to invest with.
Yeah. And it's an easy sell, I think, as well, right? Because like you said, everyone understands real estate, right? And for the most part, almost everyone wants to be involved in real estate, right? You always say, oh, I'm investing in real estate. Oh, I wish I could invest in real estate or whatever it is, right? Always the case. So it's an easy sell. I'm going to buy this property. You need for 100,000. It needs 20,000 worth of work, and I'm going to sell it for 200,000. I'm just making up numbers in my head. Everyone gets that, right? Everyone understands that, right? But you start talking about mutual funds and, you know, the stock market. Well, I don't understand it. Maybe, again, I'm sure you do, but it's way over my head. I can understand real estate. It's pretty simple, right? To some extent.
Right.
And I think, and it's again, like, it's that thing of, I don't have money, I can't invest. Well, like you said, you can probably think of 10 people who have a good amount of money in their IRA, right?
Everybody knows somebody.
Yeah, for sure. You know, 10, and all you have to do is figure out what you're going to do. So maybe learn a little bit about flipping or whatever you're investing. Don't just say, hey, give me 100 grand. I've never read a book, or I've never done any kind of studying, but kind of learn about it, or partner up with someone. Maybe even you could even, if you want to take it to that step, you can find someone who's a good flipper and say, hey, if I bring you this money, can we do this deal together? We'll split the profits. So you should even split the profits with them. And so there's just always a way, I think, and that's just a fantastic way to do it. So I think, for people who don't have money and want to consider investing in real estate, that's a fantastic way to go, I think.
No, I agree. I love it.
I'm already thinking, like, who do I know?
Everyone's got one.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, it's been a really interesting conversation. But before we go, there's always questions that I ask people that are wrestling themed, real estate question themes, right? I give you a little bit of a heads up before, and I told you some of Todd's answers, so you don't have to feel so bad. The first question is, every wrestler has a name. What would your wrestling name be?
God, I had something a second ago when we were talking about it, and I should have written it down because it totally slipped my brain. But God, man,
Let's get back to that one. Then. Let's do that one last. Then maybe it might come back to you again. Every wrestler has a special move, right? A signature move that they have. What is your signature move, a special move in real estate? What is your biggest strength?
So my wife said that it would be something to do with a ladder. So she said it would be like the ladder slam, because one time I may have threatened to throw someone out a window And she was like, yeah, so you just climb up on a ladder and throw somebody. So I was like, all right, it would be like the ladder, like Grand Slam or something. And I know you guys don't use ladders anymore, but they used to. You know, when I was a
Oh,
kid,
they
people
still
used to
do.
get
They
hit with
still do.
ladders and
Yeah,
like
they still do.
chairs and stuff.
Yeah, they still do. They still.
Oh, do they? Yeah, that's dangerous, man.
I love that. You threatened to throw someone out the window. That's great.
He deserved it, all right?
Yeah, of course. I believe. No, I believe it. I believe it. I absolutely believe it. What's been the biggest body slam you've taken in your real estate investing career? I'm sure there's been quite a few, but what's one of the biggest you can think of?
I would say the biggest thing that was outside of my control was we had a project up in Portland that, very long story short, I bought from a wholesaler. It's right behind a school, and the city did a survey on it and knew about an underground river and didn't really say anything about it. And then I completely remodeled this house and put in a new foundation, and they approved it and they signed off on the foundation. Then when I was trying to get my certificate of occupancy, they showed up and said, hey, sorry, we messed up. You can't finish this house. You have to tear down this entire $400,000 house.
Wow.
So I had to tear down a $400,000 house.
And that cost was all on you. They didn't.
Nope. So I talked to attorneys, and attorneys like, you can sue the city, but good, you know, how long is that going to take? How much money are you going to spend? So luckily, my contractor up there is amazing. He's one of the most honorable guys I've ever met, and he helped me come up with a plan to, after we tore it down, to build a new, bigger home with an ADA unit out of the basement. An ADA unit, like houses that are new that have ADA units down there, go for like $750,000, $800,000. So my cost to rebuild is going to be about $3. So I'm going to be like all in $7, and I'll sell for $750 to $8. So after closing costs, I'm not going to make any money, but I'll at least get it all back. The problem why it's been such a body slam is like, I have a partner on that deal, and it was so disheartening to have to be like, hey, this house is completely done, and now I have to tear it down. Oh, and by the way, getting the plans approved to rebuild a new house took 13 months. Oh, and then the time to build the new house is going to take 12 months. So it's just like this 6 months to 12-month project just turned into a 3-year endeavor. So that sucked.
And there's probably nothing you could have done about that, right? Is there anything you
No.
could have done?
There's nothing I could have done about that.
One of those things. Well, at least thankfully you're not going to lose money, so I'm glad to hear that.
That's all. Hey, that's why I keep telling my wife, hey, we're getting all of our money back. I'll be happy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the answer is going to be no to this, but was there a moment you were standing on the top rope getting ready to jump, but you were scared? What was it, and how did you overcome it? You don't seem like the guy who gets scared of anything.
If anything, I need to get on that rope and go, maybe I shouldn't. Like, I have such a problem with, like, literally, Barry, I'll sit there and be like, all right, I'm at it. Like, I'm at my limit. You know, like, there's not enough hours in this day. There's not an extra minute in this day that I can afford to do one more thing. And then one of my agents will send me something, or even one of my partners will be like, hey, what if we opened this like self-storage unit? And I'm always like, type, let's do it. And then afterwards I'm like, why? Like, you don't, there's the time, stop, man. Like, stop buying stuff. Like,
it's like the wife who comes home with a bunch of different clothes or shoes that she doesn't need. You keep coming home with a new piece of real estate.
But different houses. I'm not kidding. There was one point, Barry, where I had to have my wife sign something, and she's like, where is this? What is this for? I was like, oh, it's this house we're selling. She's like, I didn't even know you own that house. I was like, there's a lot of houses you don't even know that I own. Like,
that's amazing. I love that. But that's a good problem to have, right? I think it's better to be on that side of things, of action taking and moving forward and doing these crazy deals, than like just sitting back and not doing it, right? Because it's just And plus, it's fun, right? Let's be honest, it's kind of fun as well, right? We wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't.
No, it is. It's addicting. It's so addicting. That's the other problem.
So if you didn't, don't worry about it. Do you remember the name?
I should have wrote it down because I was like, actually, that's pretty good. I totally. One of my buddies. I will. I'll figure it out and I'll send it to you because it was good.
Okay, we'll put it in the description. We'll put it in the headline. Cool, man. Well, hey, thank you so much for making the time. I'm sorry that I took one of those 80 hours away from you.
Yeah, no worries, man. It was worth it.
I know you're so busy, but yeah, I appreciate it, man. And that was really fun talk, man. It's so interesting, and man, you're inspiring. Like I think I told you that before. You and Todd, you both, like, you guys are really inspiring. I love talking to you. You guys are just out there doing deals, right? You're just like not talking about it, just doing it, right? And you just kind of keep moving forward and taking so much action, right? Crazy amount of action, and just. It's just really cool and inspiring to hear. So I really appreciate it. And I think a lot of people hopefully will get a lot of inspiration from listening to that as well. So I appreciate it. But before we go, for one, do you want to talk about where people can get hold of you if they want any lending, if they want to hear more about what you're doing and whatnot?
Yeah, I don't know. Do you want me to send you a contact thing, or you just want me to tell them like, hey, this is?
Yeah, I'll put it in this. Maybe say it, and then I'll put it in the description as well.
Yeah. So like I said, my name's Brian Mineau. I work for PRMI. So if you search Brian Mineau, you'll find me there. I've got multiple emails. I'll tell them to you, but they're kind of confusing.
I'll put them in the description. Yeah, I'll put them in the description.
And then, yeah, honestly, you can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. It's just most of the stuff's my name because, again, I do a lot of different stuff. So you might find stuff on there for like 6 or 7 different companies I run. So you might find something that says Hotel California. You might find something that says Prime Res. Like it's all over the place.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, man. That was awesome. That was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me, Barry.